Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Season 3, Episode 4 of Titans. So, this episode honestly is a filler episode. We really just have, the reason why this episode I think is the way it is just because, hey, people are probably still catching up on the other 3 episodes. Or we really just have this being like, hey man, like that last episode was really good, right? So we don't have to do jack crap nothing here. Like when we have an episode, honestly, that's dedicated to Starfire, I'm like, wow, that seems very rare. Like it feels like we have little like blips and whatever of Starfire. Like it seems like they're actually making her at least a little bit more important in this show, somewhat. But like it's kind of sad when like Barbara Gordon seems to be having more screen time than any of the other Titans. And is she an actual Titan? No. But, like everything is just catered around Nightwing. Everything is heavily just like Grayson, Grayson, Grayson. Even to the point where I'm still just like, man, like why we went with the Nightwing Crane story again here, and I'm just like, is there going to be a payoff to this anytime soon? Like, is this going to finally conclude the whole, like, Grayson Crane story? Like, is it going to finally be over? In this episode, we have something barely for Superboy to do in this episode. But it seems that Beast Boy is actually having something to do in this episode because Death of Hank or Hawk basically just pushes other characters to forcibly have something to frickin' do. Because if Hawk and Dove were still a thing, and if Nightwing was still a thing, like those are always where the stories are going. Basically, once you take out Hawk, you basically kill almost Dove. So now it's just like, well, I guess we have to tell other stories with other people now. That sucks, because, like, oh man, I didn't want to, like, I just wanted to tell, like, just a story that seemed important for 3 characters, not the whole rest of the team, because, like, that's hard. So, yeah, like, I have not much to say about this episode. It feels just like a victory lap, to just say, like, hey, man, like, we did it. Like, man, that episode was great last week, huh? Like, but, not even Red Hood had much to do in this episode that felt, like, relevant I'm like, yeah, it's just like, man, I can't wait to, like, could we have a flashback of, like, Barbara Gordon as Batgirl? Wouldn't that be sweet? I'm waiting for that moment to come. We get also a moment for Grayson to give us some backstory of himself with being with Bruce at one point. But it kind of feels like they had to, like, figure out how to try to make Grayson look young, meaning like they had to kind of like they had quite a distance away from Grayson while he's to kind of do what he does in this episode. And plus there's also like when we actually do have a fight sequence in this episode, why is it that it had to be so ridiculously dark? Like, if you're only going to get one shot at frickin' a fight scene, like, are these guys not as good as fighting, obviously, in this season? Like, what's going on? It kind of feels like there have rarely been, like, for 4 episodes, it feels like we've barely gotten some fight scenes in this season. It just feels like a lot of these things are just kind of missions in this season, and I'm kind of waiting for us to go back in actual fighting episodes. if there was ever actually fighting episodes in Titans. But anyways, so yeah, so let's go on into that double five time territory because I think it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time you spoil this episode. So I'm gonna paraphrase this one. It might not go perfectly down and I always paraphrase things anyways, so everyone should learn about that by now. So, for the spoiler terms, like the very beginning of this is to basically everybody's in mourning of Hawk's death. If you didn't realize that, you should have checked out the last episode because you're kind of in here a little bit random to not know Hawk is dead. And basically, that's what ends up basically killing Dove in this episode to just have her go, yeah, maybe I'm just gonna not be like on the show for X amount of episodes now because since I don't have Hawk, what am I anymore? So, Superboy is to mention to Beast Boy how, man, like Superman probably would have saved the day. Superman would have done this. I'm like, is Superboy ever gonna become his own person? Like, we obviously the only time we ever saw him was basically with no clothes on before, and now we just have him pinging on the fact that like Superboy, or Superman. I'm like, come on, like freaking like. I want this Superboy to be like Young Justice Superboy. Like, that's the Superboy I freaking liked. That's like, we had Superboy who eventually ended up with Miss Martian for the most point. And so, like, I was just kind of like, I'm like, man, I can't wait till they introduce Miss Martian in the fold. So that way there's another character in here. But I'm sure that, like, they'll probably wait till like season 4 or 5 to do Miss Martian. I'm hoping 4. Like they have to have some kind of story in 4, right? And that probably has to be Miss Martian. So, anyways, uh, so Superboy is mentioning how like Superman probably would have saved the day, and Superboy is also mentioning like how like everybody is gonna possibly think that Superboy's Lex side is eventually gonna come out sometime and like take over and whatever, and like Superboy is giving or Beast Boy is giving Superboy the bird. It's just like, yeah, like freaking like whatever, man. Like, but like everybody's just really grieving and everybody's just kind of like acting out because they're all just grieving over the loss, and some people deal with it in a certain way. Dove comes in and kind of breaks up the whole argument between these two, where Dove is to tell like Superboy like, hey, you didn't kill Hawk, I killed Hawk. So like freaking just don't think that you kind of killed him kind of thing, because I did. Like, buck up, Superboy, buck up. Freaking have the whole entire episode dedicated to you and actually have it be a good episode for all that's important in the life of whatever. So, that eventually transitions us later to having, like, Dove going on a plane to just, like, I'm peacing out. Where Grayson is to talk about, like, Deathstroke and how, like, it never seemed that any one of them had ever become, like, a killer or murderer. And Dove is like, well, like, you could say that, but Dove, kapow, you know what I mean? She almost killed two birds with one stone. Technically, Red Hood is was technically Robin before, so two birds with one stone. So she could have shot Robin and could have still killed Hawk. So technically double murderer almost. So Honk or Dove goes and flies off to wherever the heck she's going. So Starfire is to actually have an episode here where she's to again go and like phone her therapist guy for whatever reason. And then because Starfire is still having these blackouts, and so she finally is to just try to like want to figure out how to solve all this. And so Beast Boy is like, oh well, I have the answer. So he takes her to this like sleep chamber thing in this room where like I guess she's to go and confront her her blackout side or whatever. And like no matter how much damage that Starfire could possibly do, like it won't affect this room. So, or this little chamber that's in this room. So what ends up happening is Starfire is like, okay, that sounds great. And so Starfire goes in there and all of a sudden is to wake up in the middle of a road of nowhere. And so Starfire gets out of the car, is to all of a sudden have to pop the trunk because Beast Boy is in the trunk. And so Beast Boy mentioned that Starfire had gotten out of the chamber, had punched Beast Boy in the face, and then Starfire had driven to this bizarre location. And so Beast Boy is like, well, do you think that whatever person like forced you to come here, like do you think it was just random? And Starfire was like, no, I think there's a real purpose for me to have been driven here. So eventually that leads us to having Starfire kind of looking around. All of a sudden she ends up finding this seemingly like secret door that was hidden with this grass. So she opens it up to go like down this ladder to this underground science lab that this scientist is just like, oh hey, great, you guys are finally here, thank God. Like, I'm sure this guy hasn't seen the light of day all that much, but we find here that there is a cell for a character named Black Star, which I remember Teen Titans, but I don't remember Black Star all that much. Like, I'm assuming Black Star is basically just like Starfire, and I think Black Star, was like, I thought Black Star was kind of like the older sister of Starfire, but maybe they adjusted that or changed that for this story. But anyways, so Starfire is playing catch up with Black Star, and so all this just leads to have Firestar going and taking Black Star and like leaving with her. Like, that's all that comes with that. And I'm like, man, that's just like some crazy stuff. Some crazy, all kinds of crazy, right? So who cares? Who cares about like Starfire? But what is? Anyways, so pushing on. So Nightwing is to take Crane supposedly to Blackgate, or the like. I want to like. Every time I want to just say like Bloodhaven something, but anyway. So supposedly Crane is to go to Blackgate, and so Grayson is to take him there. And so Barbara is to kind of watch over Grayson as Grayson is to do this. And so we have one of the people working with Barbara who's just like, you know what, this Grayson guy, do you really think that he can be trusted? Like, who is he really? And so Barbara starts talking about Grayson, and so this guy is just like, well, so he's just a friend to you. Like, he's like, who is he exactly? Like, is he Nightwing? I know he's Nightwing, isn't he, Barbara? Or should I say Batgirl? I'm joking, it doesn't go into that part. But man, like, wouldn't that be a sweet, just like, some random person just figuring it out? So, man, do we need a Batgirl freaking, like, flashback. And I mean, like, 2 episodes ago. Anyways, so Grayson is to supposedly go to Blackgate with Crane, but instead he ends up just going to this bizarrish cabin to have Grayson talk about his survival training there, and I guess how he was uh, like chased down by dogs and all kinds of things there because Bruce is such an a-hole, and Crane is like, yeah, I'm sure that was hard. Like, I'm sure what Bruce had probably done to you was so many awful things. I'm sure. So because Crane is technically a therapist, and so like I'm sure Crane is gonna probably therapize Grayson here, or therapized. I don't know if that's the right word, but anyways. So eventually, what ends up happening here, is that Barbara is to decide. You know what, like, how about we have a tracker, or how about we find somebody that's going to figure out where Grayson is, because I want to know why he's gone to this cabin, because eventually they find that, like, this car is in a spot where there's, like, nothing there and it doesn't quite make sense. So Barbara Barbara is to scramble a helicopter to make her way to where Grayson is. So when she finally gets there, that's eventually when Nightwing and Red Hood are fighting it out, fisticuffs. But you can't really tell what's going on. It's kind of in the dark because I guess really it's like, hey man, this is the only fight sequence in this entire show, so we don't want to do anything too accurate because somebody would get punched in the face, right? Like someone with a helmet on, like someone like viciously will get hit in the face who has a helmet on, and like things could happen. Stunt doubles. So, uh, really, what ends up happening here is Nightwing, uh, Red Hood fighting it out, duking it out. And so Red Hood is just kind of mentioning how Nightwing really is kind of very much more fighting like Batman. Like, I don't know what it is, but it seems like Nightwing is just going to eventually get pushed to eventually become Batman. It seems like they keep going to that same line of dialogue. I think Nightwing had that talk with Dove about maybe Nightwing taking on like the Batman mantle, and I think that's what's going to happen here. Maybe like by the end of this season, maybe the last episode, we're gonna have Nightwing become Batman, and then everybody's like, "Oh, sweet!" Because that's the whole thing now, where every single like Grayson thing has to be this progression from like the Robin suit into the Nightwing suit, and everybody's like, "Oh, wow!" Like Nightwing suit, that's sweet, and then all of a sudden, like, I'm assuming we're eventually going to transition Nightwing to Batman, because I'm sure Batman is just like, dude, I'm done. Deuces. I'm out of here. So, uh, so, so Jason and Grayson are fighting it out, duking it out, to eventually have Grayson get shot, and really that cues up Todd to get the heck out of there, and that also leads Crane to get the heck out of there also. And so the last thing we just see is Grayson making his way back into the cabin, just be like, well, fuck. like mother, like, God, like, so, like, yeah, that's basically what happens towards the very tail end of this episode. So, really, like, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Black Star. Uh, God, I would really love for us to just have a Green Lantern in the show. Is it me, or do I just, like, I desperately just want a Green Lantern in this show? Like, I know Stargirl, I think, does have a Green Lantern in her show, but I stopped watching that show, I think, after the pilot, just because I lost complete interest. So, like, I don't think there's probably, like, they hinted at stuff, but, like, I don't think there's ever going to be anything for a Green Lantern, like, going to eventually be on this show. But anyways, we could always hope, right? I I just freaking, like, when you really look at it, like, there's several different kinds of lanterns. There's like red lanterns, pink lanterns, purple lanterns, whatever. Like, you would have thought that they could have just played around with that, like, a little bit, or just, like, played around with certain characters, because, like, Suicide Squad plays around with that, but, like, no one else does. Like, I would honestly like there to just be one episode where they just kind of have this bizarre villain that they just take care of for once, instead of, like, we just have this one, like, straight story. Like, it would be cool to just have one episode, kind of like the Doctor Light thing, where that didn't feel like a whole huge progression, or the nuclear family that we had here, um, in Titans, I think. Yeah, yeah. Um, but the goal always was Trigon, or the goal always was Batman, or the goal always was, like, hey, let's get this team together for whatever reason. But anyways, yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to say for this spoiler. Thank you, anyone who ever watches any of these, any of the videos that I put together whatsoever. I really do appreciate it if it doesn't feel like that. But yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.